I don't recall exactly when we made this birdhouse, but it was at least 16 or 17 years ago. It was out of cedar, so it held up pretty well, but the years have taken its toll and we need a new one. I don't think we're going to build a new one out of wood, though. I think we're going to build it out of slate because I've been reading books about slate roofs and how they last for hundreds of years, and I'd like to give it a try and the closest thing that I can come up with around here. Not having any houses or dog houses that need roofed, we're going to make this birdhouse out of it. An angle grinder with a diamond blade would probably do the trick, but since I happen to have a large, sort of professional level tile saw, and I'm also about to sell it, I thought we'd get one more project out of it and use this. It makes mitering really easy and accurate. If you're not going to make a lot of cuts, it's usually easier to just put a bucket of water next to the saw and dunk the pump in that rather than filling up the tray. I did end up making a lot of cuts, of course, but in any case, that lower bucket down there is full of coal, and that coal is for our forge, and here's the anvil, which is covered in cobwebs. This will probably show up later. Meanwhile, back at the ranch, we're going to zoom in and find our slate tiles, which have been squirreled away in the corner for quite a while now. Since summer, in fact, which is the customary time for building birdhouses, but it'll be okay. We are more or less duplicating the dimensions of that other birdhouse, so a bit of layout is going to take place here. Pencil works well on tile because it washes away easily, although with a wet saw it can be a bit of an issue, in which case you can go to a grease pen or a wax pen, but those don't work as well on porous tiles like slate because they get in there and it's harder to scrape off. Good for porcelain though because they wipe off easily. In any case, we're going to get our ear protection here. These little water cooling jets are absolutely critical to successful cuts. You may think that you'd be able to take a cup or something and pour water alongside the blade. Does not work, I can tell you from experience. So you get these and you adjust them pretty close to the rim there. We'll also come to the back of the saw and tilt it over so that we can make miter cuts. It takes a bit of time to get all this set up, but once you do, making the cuts is pretty easy. You just fire it up, lay your tile on there, and slide it through at a reasonable pace. That's it. It comes out pretty much right on every time. One thing that I really like about tile saws is that they don't have teeth on the blades. It's just abrasive, and I don't know how true it is, but it definitely feels a little bit better not to have teeth there. You feel like you can be a little closer with your hand without it potentially getting pulled into the blade. After that, it's a few more marks and a few more cuts and a few more cuts and finally a few more cuts. The results are pretty consistent, so we're pleased about that. We can also move over to using the stop a little bit for some of these repetitive cuts. It has a flippable 45 guide as well. Another brief montage of cuts gets the remaining pieces trimmed up to shape. Then we fit them all up together here and do a little bit of layout for the gable ends, if you want to call them that. And then we trim those on the saw. One nice thing about having the rubber base is that you can pretty much just lay pieces on there, and once you get them in the right position, you can slide them in and they won't move around. One notable downside to the rubber base is that since it is flat, when you're cutting sharp tiles, or hard ones like porcelain, which have sharp little bits that come off there, the grit builds up, and sometimes you'll use the back of your hand to brush it away, and you can end up with these little tiny cuts in your hand that you don't even feel at the time, just because they're so sharp. And then you're carrying the tile back and your hands are wet to put it on the wall or on the floor, and there's blood dripping on the floor. I've definitely done that before, which is a little embarrassing in other people's homes. At any rate, the gable end came out pretty square, as we can see with our speed square here. So we're going to lay them on the table and do a quick mock-up with all four walls. I did make a few adjustments to the cuts, but not too many. It was pretty close on the first try, and mainly I was adjusting the height of those gable ends so they line up with the 45s on the walls. And you can see that the joints are pretty tight, so we were pleased with that, although it's going to move around later. We need to cut an entry hole for the birds, so we retrieve our tile kit up from the wall there and bring it down to get out our hole saw. This is just a basic one from Home Depot, but it works pretty well, and you can use it to cut through porcelain even, as long as you keep it cool. A few more cuts are required to take care of the roof panels, but once that is done, we're down to deciding how to fasten everything together. On the left we have 14 gauge wire, and on the right we have 12. Since I have plenty of each, I decided to go with 12 gauge just due to the thickness. The way that we're going to attach these to the panels are with holes through there. If you're doing a slate roof, you can use a slate hammer and just make a hole through it, it'll split out the other side. But since we don't have too many extras and these aren't very large tiles, I thought it was best to drill pilot holes for the wire to go through. This drilling process was repeated more times than I care to remember. That seems to happen a lot with these sort of simple things where you think, well, I'll just drill a few holes through it, no problemo, but it takes a while. So we finally got all those done with frequent dipping in the water there to keep the bit cool, and everything was ready to lace it up. A pile of bare 12 gauge is ready to go, and we set the pieces next to each other and start lacing them together. This was a little bit of a tricky process because putting a piece of straight wire through it and trying to bend it around that outside corner without just crushing it and the stone is tricky. So what I ended up doing was sort of bending it into the right final shape, which will not allow it to fit into its final place. So you bend it into that shape and then unbend it a bit, put it through, and then bend it closer to 90 and twist it on the inside to snug everything up. This took a bit of practice and it's kind of hard on your fingers, but we got it going, and once you have all the walls in place, it's harder to get in there as well, but we got everything sorted out, holds it together pretty well, and we're ready to give the roof panels a little test fit. With the roof panels looking good, I wanted some sort of ridge cap for it, so we're going to take a piece of 1/2-inch copper pipe here, crush it down in the vise, then angle grind off the side of it, and then that'll allow me to open it back up into a more or less 90-degree piece and use that as a top cap. To attach the roof panels, I went through a lot of different ideas on here, but eventually I just settled on running this sort of double-ended one through the sides and sticking it up. That way the holes that penetrate through the roof will be on the outside and won't bring water in. It's not ideal because it does expose it to the freeze-thaw cycle, but it's the best thing I could come up with on short notice. Once the roof panels are in place, it's a simple matter of just bending them over and clipping them off in order to secure it in place. If you ever did need to take it off, you could bend them up again. For the top cap, which is actually our second attempt because the first one was exactly the same length as it, and what I wanted to do here is do what I'm showing, which is mark it off on the ends and then trim it down with the tin snip so it has a tab that overhangs each end, and that way I can just bend it over to secure it in place. I'd bought a 3-inch Lazy Susan bearing for the expanding table improvements, but didn't end up using it, so we finally put it to good use here. Well, there you go. That's how you build a solid slate and copper birdhouse. And if you're curious about the weight, we put it on my small food scale, which maxes out at 11 pounds, and it went right to overload. If I had to guess, I would put it at about 15 pounds because it is a hefty unit. So in any case, we'll be back with a new project next week. Thank you for watching.